Hello and welcome everyone. Hi, this is Doctors for a Cause. Hi, I'm Garima Dugar, final year medical student and a core member of Doctors for a Cause. So welcome to our another session of the DFC Masterclass. That is the Radiology Masterclass by Dr. Tirthankar Guha Thakurta, an MD Physiology and a teaching faculty at KPC Medical College and Hospital. Thank you so much for all the love and appreciation to all of y'all. Because of that, I'm just glad to share with you all that we've been able to reach the 1K subscribers mark on YouTube. Keep spreading the love that you and sharing all the feedbacks that you have been with us to help us grow. So today we start the 3-day workshop on the Radiology Masterclass by Dr. Tirthankar Guha Thakurta. Without any delay, I'll ask Sir to take over from here. Sir, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes.
So, okay. I hope I'm audible and visible as well.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So, thanks, Garima. I welcome all of you to this radiology class. Let me share with you the plan of how we should proceed with our classes on radiology. Radiology is a subject. It's not possible to cover that in 3 days. So what we'll try to do in these 3 days is essentially give you an overview of the basics that we need to know at an undergraduate level. In order to do that, on the day one, we will discuss the very basic principles of how to interpret a chest X-ray and the key terminologies related to it, how to locate the normal and abnormal findings and how to report them. On day two, we will discuss how to interpret the CT or MRI scan image of the brain and the cranium, and also find out the normal structures in it and how to locate the abnormalities and how to report them. Day three will be a day where we put everything together so that we discuss clinical cases. And as we discuss clinical cases, that day you will make diagnosis and I will only help you in the process of diagnosis. So this is the plan in which we are going to go. So today we start with interpretation of chest X-rays or chest diagram. Now, as we have always mentioned in study of biomedical imagings, for example, in the classes of ECG, etc., that we are trying to diagnose the patient, not the film. The film or the X-ray plate is only a tool to understanding the disease process. So keep in your mind that the X-ray plate is important, but it actually has much less value until we have a good clinical history. We know the chief complaints of the patient, the past history of the patient, the current medications of the patient. So radiology is not just interpretation of a plate. Every interpretation that a radiologist does is actually a consultation. And a proper consultation can only be done when you know the whereabouts of the patient, the medical history, the physical findings of the patient. For example, just give you an example. Suppose there is an abnormal rotation of the patient while doing the X-ray. In such a patient, the ribs and the clavicles will appear grossly abnormal. It is just a technical issue, but it can also be a real deformity of the chest. So unless you see the patient in person, without a properly labeled X-ray, the image means nothing. So today also, when we proceed to discuss how to interpret an X-ray image, we should always keep in mind that the most important medical information for you is the patient himself or herself. And the X-ray plate is always secondary, that supports your clinical diagnosis, which is itself not the diagnosis. So with this in mind, let us proceed to discuss the very basic principles by which a chest X-ray can be interpreted. Now you see, we started with X-ray of the chest because this is the most common X-ray plate probably that you will see in the departments of medicine, anesthesia, and also surgery. So chest X-ray is a baseline test. It gives us many information about the working of the body, not only the lungs and the heart, but it also gives clue to systemic pathology. So how do we go into interpretation of an X-ray when the plate just arrives? When we interpret a chest skiagram, there are a few words that we encounter. The film that you hold in your hand is a skiagram, and the technique of performing the X-ray is skiagraphy. The word straight X-ray is used when no contrast medium is used. And when a contrast medium is used, we call it a contrast enhanced X-ray. There are different views of the chest X-ray. The common views are the anterior-posterior, posterior-anterior, lateral, and there is also another special view known as the lateral decubitus view. Another key element of the X-ray is to know how much exposure or irradiation has happened, how the soft tissue should be interpreted, what is the air bronchogram. So step by step, I'll come through these words and we'll try to explain what these words mean before we go into the description of the X-ray. A very important factor is to know the relative density of different substances on the X-ray. Now, you must already know from your knowledge of very basic physics that if a certain thing has a higher atomic mass, it will not be very much penetrable to the X-ray. Whereas something which is having a effectively less atomic mass will be more penetrable by the X-ray. This is the reason why very hard objects like metal will look white on the X-ray plate, whereas very rarer objects like gas will appear black. So you can see the spectrum of the radiological densities. Gas has the minimum density, followed by fat, water, which is considered to be the neutral gray. Then comes the bones or cortical bone and metals or foreign bodies. This has also been represented in the panel below. You can see that a pitch black color indicates that you are dealing with air or gas. It is something that you see in the lung fields. Dark gray is the fat and light gray is the soft tissue. This is what surrounds most of the organs in our body. Bone, that is cortical bone, is nearly white in color, whereas a metal piece will be perfectly white in color on the X-ray. Technically, there are three important things. Inspiration, that is how much the patient breathes in during the X-ray, because that causes proper separation of the ribs, and it also in a way helps the lower ribs to be visualized better. The lung expands, showing the pathology at a greater resolution. Otherwise, if the person is not inspiring fully, the ribs will be very much crowded together, obscuring the pathology and sometimes mimicking the pathology. Penetration means how much of the X-ray has gone through the body, and rotation means whether the person was perfectly centrally placed or were rotated to the left or to the right. So how do we evaluate inspiration, penetration, and rotation when we have in hand a skiagram? In order to comment on the inspiration, you look at the X-ray and see whether the ribs are seen properly. At least 6 ribs should be anteriorly seen above the diaphragm if good inspiration has happened. So the rule of thumb is that if the anterior aspect shows at least 6 ribs that are lying above the diaphragm, then inspiration is okay. If at least 6 ribs do not lie above the dome of diaphragm, suspect a shallow inspiration. Shallow inspiration can be seen in people who cannot breathe properly. It may be seen in elderly people, people having chest pain, particularly rib fracture, unconscious patient, and when a patient is lying down on the bed, you do a bedside radiography. The problem with this is, as I told you, when inspiration occurs, the diaphragm goes down. It pulls the heart, so the heart looks elongated and the transverse diameter decreases. That is the normal appearance of the heart. If you do not inspire properly, the heart gets compressed and the transverse diameter increases, giving a false idea that the heart has been enlarged. Also, the blood vessels and the ribs may be crowded below, giving rise to a suspicion that there is consolidation. So look here. The image A that you see here has good inspiration. So if you see, I'll mark them out for you. If you see properly, see, this is the transverse diameter of the heart. This is the transverse diameter of the chest. Ideally, the heart diameter should be less than half of the internal chest diameter. Also, you can see that the length of the heart has been stretched out because of inspiration. The claustrophrenic angles are very clearly visible because the domes of diaphragm have moved below. The same patient, when did not inspire, you could see that anteriorly this is one rib, second rib, third rib, fourth rib, fifth rib, sixth rib is barely visible. The same patient here shows the first rib, second rib. This is how you count rib, not from the posterior surface, although they look more prominent. Third rib, fourth rib, fifth rib, sixth rib, seventh rib, eighth rib, and ninth is barely visible. So you understand here that a good inspiration means at least 6 of the ribs are far above the diaphragm. And in such a case, an apparent cardiomegaly will not appear. If it is still enlarged, you understand there has been a true cardiomegaly. So because of the depression of the diaphragm, the heart gets stretched and the transverse diameter of the heart decreases. That is how we are used to seeing the X-ray. If the person does not inspire, there will be a false identification of cardiomegaly. Also, you can see that the blood vessels will be crowded here, giving rise to hilar opacification or consolidation. That will also be a false alarm raised because actually there is no such pathology. Getting back to the rest of the descriptions. So next, coming to exposure. If proper amount of X-ray has passed through the chest, the upper thoracic vertebra should be visible through the heart, and the bronchovascular structures behind the heart should be just seen. So let us see what we mean by underexposure. The lesser amount of X-ray passes through it, more white it becomes. So underexposure causes opacification of the lung, giving a false idea that it has been consolidated. Overexposure causes blackening of the lung, giving a false idea that there is emphysema or pneumothorax. Let's see. So this is how an overexposed lung will, underexposed lung will look like. You can see the lower part is very white, as if there is consolidation in the lower part. And how do you know that it is actually not a pathology? You cannot see the vertebra through the heart. On the other hand, had it been overexposed, then the whole vertebra will be clearly seen, which is also not necessary. It should be just visible only in the upper part. And this will cause blackening of the lung field, giving a false idea that probably we are dealing with emphysema or pneumothorax. Let's see. So this is how overexposure looks like. And how do you know it is overexposure and actually not emphysema is? You can see the vertebra through and through. All the vertebra with intervertebral spaces are wonderfully seen, and such a good clarity is not needed in a proper X-ray. So if I compare underexposed X-ray, normally exposed X-ray, and an overexposed X-ray film side by side, this is how it looks like. The middle one has correct exposure. So the vertebra is just discernible but not very clearly visible. In the first one, the vertebra is invisible. In the second one, the vertebra is clearly visible. And you can see the artifact that they cause on the lung field. In the first case, it appears that the lung fields have become opacified. Maybe we will falsely diagnose an interstitial lung disease. In the third case, we will falsely diagnose emphysema. But once you look at the vertebra and the cardiac shadow, you make an interpretation of whether the exposure was right or not. So if the vertebra just barely discernible, that is the correct exposure. And in this exposure, lung fields are best interpreted. Then we come to rotation. Was the patient placed in a perfectly aligned way, or the patient was twisted? If you twist, then the shadow will not be symmetrical. And the best way to see that is to see whether the clavicles are equidistant from the midline, that is from the spinous process. So let us see what it means. See here in this diagram, in this X-ray, if you see, this are the spinous processes, the tip of the spinous process of the vertebra. And from here, if we draw the outline of the anterior end of the clavicle, these are the anterior ends of the clavicle. If you now measure the distance of this anterior end of the clavicle, I think they are more or less equal. So this is a properly centralized film. This film shows that it is properly centralized because from the midline, which is found out by joining the spinous processes, the tip of the anterior end of the clavicle are almost equidistant. Therefore, it's a properly centralized X-ray film. Let us now understand how a non-centralized or twisted film will look like. See, this is how it looks. It looks grossly abnormal, as if there has been a severe trauma and fracture. That is how it looks. So I am pointing out I'm annotating the areas which are the landmarks. So if you think these are the spinous processes, that is also obliquely placed. If this line represents the spinous processes, which is also not very perfectly straight, and this is one end of the clavicle, this is another end of the clavicle. Quite obviously, the distance is not equal. So this person is apparently twisted more on the right side, and there has been a right-sided rotation of this person, which essentially means this film should not be used for interpretation because it can lead to false interpretations. So this is not a good quality X-ray. So I hope this is clear how rotation or centralization can be understood. Now coming to the different views. X-ray is classified as posterior-anterior, lateral, antero-posterior, or lateral decubitus simply based on the direction in which the beam of X radiation is moving. So suppose if a patient is standing like this, and I'm labeling again, this is the X-ray plate. This is the beam of X-ray. Obviously, therefore, the source is somewhere here. So, if you see the direction in which the X radiation is coming, the direction is this. So, it is coming from the posterior aspect of the person towards the anterior aspect of the person. And therefore, this view that you receive here at the photographic end, that is the PA or posterior-anterior view. So it's as simple as that. You just see the direction in which the X radiation is traveling. As the X-ray is crossing the body from posterior to anterior, therefore we call it a PA view or posterior-anterior view. And this is the most standard view for majority of the investigations. For example, this is a posterior-anterior view, a typical chest X-ray view. So this is the posterior-anterior view, and if you see the different parts that are visible in the posterior-anterior view one by one, we will also come to this later also. Already you can see these are the spinous processes. This is one end of the clavicle. This is another end of the clavicle. They are more or less equidistant, so it is centralized. The ribs can also be counted. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 is barely visible. So that means there is good inspiration because at least 6 ribs were anteriorly visible. The Vertebra is barely visible through the heart, so the exposure is also correct. These are the bronchovascular markings, that is the hilar vessels and bronchus that you are seeing here. And these are normal. If you see the border of the heart, the uppermost border is formed by the aorta. Then this portion is formed by the pulmonary artery. The next portion is formed of the left atrium. It's difficult to say where it ends. And somewhere from 2/3 of this margin is the left ventricle. So if the left border of the heart is stressed from above below, the left border will be represented by the aorta, the pulmonary artery, also sometimes called the pulmonary bay because there is a curvature, the left atrium, and largely the left ventricle. So this is how the left cardiac margin or the sellout is formed. On the right side, if I again trace them, it is almost totally formed of the right atrium. It is almost totally formed of the right atrium. Sometime this upper part, sometime this portion is associated with the superior vena cava. But it is not of much significance here. Now, where does the right ventricle go? Right ventricle is anteriorly and inferiorly, so it does not cast a shadow. It can be wonderfully seen on clinical examination or on echocardiography, but in a normal X-ray, the right ventricle is not well seen. The right ventricle is placed anteriorly. It's difficult to say exactly where, but somewhere here, so that it does not cast a margin or shadow. That is why the right ventricle does not form part of the radiological border of the heart, the right border of the heart. So I hope this is clear. Also understand that there are other important bony landmarks here that can be seen. We have already seen the clavicles. The clavicles end here in the acromion process. You have the scapula here with the glenoid process. I'm sorry, that is not the glenoid process. The glenoid process is not visible here. Here, this is the glenoid process. And this is how the scapula is facing. You can project it 3D and understand. Sometime a part of the humerus can also be seen. These are the ribs, and these are the soft tissue shadows, which are muscles and fat. These are the domes of diaphragm. The labeling is left here. Also, the cardiac apex is on this side. So this is the left dome of diaphragm. And therefore, you expect the spleen and stomach to be here. This small gas shadow is the gas shadow of the fundus that is present in the stomach, because the spleen and the stomach are present here only. And this is mainly a shadow due to liver. So this is how different parts of the anteroposterior view of the X-ray can be understood. I hope this is clear to everyone. I will be repeating this again and again, so don't worry. So I will keep on repeating these anatomical landmarks. And always remember that the ribs are counted from this anterior curvature. It is not counted. I'm showing you the wrong method now. A wrong method to count the rib is like this. You never count ribs like this, because this leads to mistakes. That is why you always count anteriorly. Okay, so I think we can proceed. So in lateral decubitus, this is how the patient is standing. because it is coming from one lateral side and passing down the other lateral side. It is called lateral position. And in the lateral view, the X-ray looks like this. Of course, the right and left are superimposed. You cannot identify right and left here. Lateral view helps in identifying anterior and posterior, not right and left. Right and left is identified by understanding the AP view now, or the PA view. Now, this lateral view sometimes confuses people. People often sometimes do not understand what are the structures in the lateral view. I will show the structures once, and then I'll show you an easy technique to mentally understand which structure is what. So let's see. This dark shadow here is the cardiac shadow. This is the heart. This is quite understandable that this is the vertebral column or the spine, with the intervertebral spaces wonderfully seen. Now, if you look carefully, there are things you have to imagine here because it's an X-ray, not a contrast X-ray. So many things are very vague, but you have to understand it by anatomical location. If you look very carefully, the structure, the structures that will be present anterior and posterior to these are, we must have somewhere down the lane the aorta. So aorta lies somewhere like this. And the branches of the pulmonary arteries lie somewhere here. Only during pathology they will become prominent. Under physiological condition, they are not very prominent. And the fissures are not easily visible. And it's also not possible to see the fissures. But if you imagine somewhere down the line, you will see this is how the oblique fissure will move, dividing the lung into two lobes. And in some other cases, there will also be a horizontal fissure dividing the lung further. So these are the broad landmarks. And I will come to all these separately one by one. So how do we understand the structures in the lateral view? Imagine this is a very basic skeletal framework of the lateral view. So the only thing that you can prominently see is the sternum in front and the bony vertebral column behind. I think there will be no confusion in these two structures. These are very easily identified. Then you find the oval or rounded opacity in front, and that is the cardiac shadow. And from the tip of the cardiac shadow, if you trace, you get the position of the aorta. Once you get the position of the aorta in the lateral view, imagine two areas very much. One is almost inside the heart and one is at the posterior margin of the heart, representing the two branches of the pulmonary arteries. And then this is how approximately the fissures of the lung run. I am telling you again, you are not going to see this. This is to describe. So when you get a pathology or an opacity, you have to say where it is present. So based on these imaginary lines, then you can approximately say whether it is in the anterior part or posterior part, whether it is in the upper lobe or in the lower lobe. And you should always corroborate this with the anteroposterior or posterior-anterior view for a total 3D identification. So putting them side by side, this is how they look like. So now you can understand this is the cardiac shadow. So I am now labeling them once again for you. So this is the cardiac shadow in this patient. This is the shadow of the aorta. It is difficult to label the pulmonary arteries here. They are somewhere here and here, but they cannot be seen exactly like that. The spine is wonderfully seen. It is visualized properly. The sternum is also very nicely seen. Sorry. And you can imagine the fissures of the lung to run like this. So these are the landmarks in the lateral view, and you should always corroborate this with the anteroposterior or posterior-anterior view. Done? Good. Now coming over to the anteroposterior view. Anteroposterior view is never a preferred view. It is typically done when you do ambulatory X-ray or portable X-ray in a patient who cannot sit up or who cannot stand up. So the patient lies on the bed. The X-ray film is kept behind the patient on the bed, and the beam is projected from the front. As the direction is from anterior to posterior, it is called anteroposterior view. Now in anteroposterior view, there is one particular speciality that you should keep in mind. Although we assume the X-ray beams to project almost parallelly, they are never totally parallel. So suppose this is the source of the X-ray, and suppose somewhere here there is the heart. This is the sternum. Lungs are by the side. Now when the X-ray is being, and the ribs are, the spine is here, and these are the ribs. In anteroposterior view, as you can easily understand, the direction of the radiation is from here to here. It is supposed to be parallel, but it is never parallel. The beams are almost always divergent in nature. Because the beams are divergent in nature, so if you cast a shadow somewhere, you will see that there is an apparent magnification of the image. That is quite obvious. So if the size of the heart is actually, say, C, it will cast a shadow bigger than C. Let us call it C dash. Such magnification is also occurring during the posterior anterior view. And in that case, the structure closer to the beam is the lung. So the lung gets enlarged more and the heart is not enlarged that much. Which means in the posterior anterior view, if I now draw, suppose this is the source of the X-ray. This is the patient with the heart. I'm sorry, I will draw the source on the opposite side. These are the ribs. And this is the spine. So in the same patient, if the source of the radiation is behind and the screen is placed in the front, you can easily see what is going to happen here. The magnification of the heart will be relatively less. Comparably, the magnification of the lung will be more because it is closer. It's as simple as if you stand close to the candle, your shadow will be bigger. If you stand away from the candle light, your shadow will be smaller. So the structure which is closer to the source of radiation will cast a bigger shadow. The structure that is away from the source of radiation will cast a smaller shadow. That means in the posterior anterior view, the cardiac shadow is relatively smaller. Whereas in the anteroposterior view, because heart is anteriorly, so the cardiac silhouette usually becomes larger. So this causes a larger cardiac shadow. Now, if you know and remember this, that is not much of a problem, which means you should not interpret cardiomegaly specifically on an AP view. But if you keep this in mind, you can make mental adjustment and cancel out that effect. But if you don't keep this in mind, you can erroneously diagnose cardiomegaly in a patient who does not have cardiomegaly. So let me show you what kind of artifacts are created here. So in the anteroposterior view, see, this is the AP view, this is the PA view. You can see easily the differences in the diameter of the heart. It is the same patient. It is done at the same time, only the views have been changed. This is the maximum cardiac diameter here. This is the maximum cardiac diameter here. So the entire view gets distorted. Also, the lower ribs become a bit crowded. The bronchovascular markings become more prominent because in a lying position, it is difficult for the back of the chest to expand and spread out the blood vessels during inspiration. So these are the problems that you see in a AP view compared to a PA view. So a standard is always PA view. You do an AP view when a patient is sick and cannot stand up, and then you mentally make adjustment that you will not overestimate these things because these are normal consequences of an anteroposterior view. I hope this is clear to everyone. Okay, so we move on. In the lateral decubitors, the patient lies by the side. And this is particularly done when a fluid layer has to be seen. Sometimes the fluid is so little that it cannot be seen in the costophrenic recess. So it can be seen by the side. So pleural effusion or hydropneumothorax can sometimes be visualized by a lateral decubitus. So so you see, this is the mediastinum showing the cardiac shadow. You can see the borders of the heart. You can see the hilar markings indicating blood vessels and bronchus. If you look very carefully, I will show you a few more structures here. If you look carefully, you will see a dark shadow comes down like this. This is the shadow of the trachea. And the trachea, as you know, is normally in the center or slightly to the right. This trachea is slightly to the right, which is a normal finding. The cardiac shadow have already been explained, the right border and the left border of the heart. These are the contours of the diaphragm. And this is the gastric air bubble or the fundic gas. Ribs have already been shown, soft tissue shadows have already been shown. The angle that the heart makes with the diaphragm, these two are known as cardiophrenic angle. And the angle that the lung makes with the diaphragm are the costophrenic angles. In case of pleural effusion, fluid will first accumulate in the costophrenic recess. And therefore, blurring or obliteration of the costophrenic angle means there is fluid in the pleural space. Pleura are never visualized until there is an abnormality. So only when there is air, water, or fluid in the pleural space, only then it will become visualized. Coming to the normal size of the heart. When you estimate the size of the heart, I am removing the annotations so that it is easy to see. So if you want to estimate the size of the heart, first draw a midline. That is usually corresponding to the spinous processes. On each side of the midline, try to find out the maximum diameter of the heart. On this side, this seems to be the maximum diameter. On this side, this seems to be the maximum diameter. So what I'm trying to say is that they need not be at the same level. So suppose on the left side, the diameter that you find is called the CL, or the left-sided cardiac radius, and this is the CR, that is the right-sided cardiac radius. So the effective cardiac diameter C will be equal to CL plus CR. Similarly, in the chest also, you find out the maximum internal diameter of the chest. That can usually be found in the same plane only. So you decide which plane you choose. Suppose this is the maximum internal diameter, and you call this T for thoracic diameter. When you take a ratio of C by T, it is called cardiothoracic ratio. So a ratio of C by T is known as cardiothoracic ratio. Under normal circumstances, the cardiothoracic ratio should be less than half, that is less than 0.5. That means the maximum diameter of the heart should be less than half of the maximum internal diameter of the thorax. If it is more than 0.5, then you say that cardiomegaly is present. So when the cardiothoracic ratio is more than 0.5, then you say that there is cardiomegaly. Also understand that in X-ray, cardiomegaly simply means enlargement of the heart shadow, irrespective of the cause. So we are not trying to judge whether it is a left ventricular hypertrophy or a right ventricular hypertrophy, or it is a false enlargement due to pleural pathology or pericardial pathology. We are only interested in this ratio of the diameters, and if it is more than 0.5, then we say that cardiomegaly is present. I hope this part is clear to everyone, how cardiomegaly can be diagnosed. So I'm repeating once again. So when you look at the X-ray, look at the costophrenic angles. They will be obliterated when there is pleural effusion. Look at the cardiophrenic angles. Look at the two borders of the heart, and look at the effective diameter of the heart and the maximum internal diameter of the chest to get an idea of the heart size. Also, there is an important saying. Sometimes it is very difficult to find pathology that are very close to the heart or the lung. They merge with each other. The pictures merge with each other. In that case, sometimes we use a principle known as the Silaud sign. In the Silaud sign, what we say is that suppose there is some kind of a mass, abnormal mass present here. If this abnormal mass makes the border of the heart hazy, probably it is directly attached to the border of the heart. Because in an X-ray, it's difficult to say whether the mass lies anteriorly or posteriorly to the heart. The projection will be such that they will look to be side by side. So how do you know whether it is actually side by side? If the border becomes irregular, if the silhouette is actually lost, then you know that the two structures are close, because it simply means there is fibrosis or adhesion or inflammation that has obscured the border. So if the normal contour of the heart shadow changes in contact with the opacity, then the opacity is probably in contact with the heart. That is what the Silaud sign says. So we'll again come back to this later. Let's go to the next slide. Am I visible and audible?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So coming over to the mediastinum, as I said, the mediastinum position is understood from the position of the trachea and the heart. You learned how to find out the trachea. Now coming over to the lungs. Normally there are visible markings on the lung due to pulmonary arteries and veins that continue all the way into the chest wall. We have already seen them. They are called the bronchovascular markings. And diaphragm, as I told you, the right dome is mainly due to the elevation of the liver. The left dome is due to the spleen. And below the left dome, you often find the gastric bubble or the fundic gas shadow. So this again is the normal X-ray that we were discussing. The pleura is only visible when there is a abnormality present. Otherwise, pleura is not visible. Pleura becomes visible in effusion, pneumothorax, or in hydropneumothorax, as we shall see later. Soft tissue, as I told you, that soft tissues are usually gray in appearance. They can sometimes obscure certain signs. Breast tissue may obscure the costophrenic angle. You have to be careful if the subject is female. You should not diagnose the breast tissue mass as a separate diagnosis because it is often misinterpreted by the beginners. Different bones may be seen apart from ribs and clavicles. Part of the scapula, vertebra, and proximal humeri are also seen, and their pathology can also be seen in the chest X-ray. So when you describe the abnormal findings, first thing you understand, just like we do not describe gross findings in a histopathology, histopathological findings in a gross pathology, you do not use or try not to use clinical words or non-radiological words while seeing a radiological picture. So you can call a lesion dense, you can call a lesion opaque, you cannot call a lesion vascular. You cannot see blood vessels here. You can call a marking vascular marking, but you cannot call it a vessel. You are not seeing the vessel there. So it's important that you stick to radiological terminologies. Your final diagnosis may be clinical or pathological, but the description should always be used in radiological words the way I have described. When we describe a normal chest X-ray, you see, you look for a few findings, describe the lung fields, describe the cardiac shadow, the two margins, the cardiophrenic angle, costophrenic angle, and diaphragm, describe about the position of the trachea and mediastinum, and discuss about the bones and soft tissue shadow. This pretty much summarizes the findings of a chest X-ray. So you first identify and mention the view, discuss the lung fields, heart shadow and mediastinum, costophrenic, cardiophrenic angle and diaphragm, bony cage and soft tissue, and then give your final impression. The impression may be a radiological diagnosis or maybe a clinical diagnosis. And you should always corroborate with clinical findings in order to reach a diagnosis. Up to this, is this overview clear to you? I know that I did not discuss many things. Is this apparent overview clear to all of you? So now that we have some idea of how to proceed with an X-ray, I'll give you cases one by one. And in the process of solving the cases, we'll try to learn how to read an X-ray. This is your first question. So you can answer in the chat box and just choose the option from A to E. So we have started receiving answers. In this diagram, the question was whether we have emphysema, overexposure, enlarged heart, all of the above or none of the above. So emphysema may be present here, but it is not a right film to comment on emphysema. As you can see that the entire spine or the vertebra can be seen through the cardiac shadow. It is definitely an overexposed film, and you cannot comment on lung films in an overexposed film. So it's best to say that the film is overexposed. So B, the film is overexposed, is the right answer. We move on to the next question. So in this diagram, inspiration is good or poor or cannot be inferred. So almost all of you are saying the inspiration is poor. Some are saying that it is good. Let me see. There is only one way to find out, by drawing the ribs. So first rib, second rib, third rib, fourth rib, fifth rib, sixth rib, seventh, and only a part of eight. So now you tell me whether it is a good inspiration or bad inspiration. It is obviously a good inspiration, because at least 6 ribs are seen clearly above the diaphragm. So there should be a technique of interpretation. You just don't look at something and say. You try to find out the rules. The rule of commenting on inspiration is to count the anterior ribs above the diaphragm. If at least 6 of them are clearly visible, then it is a good inspiration. Whether the heart is elongated or not, it doesn't matter. The matter is inspiration is good. Then you come to the cardiac pathology and the cardiac diagnosis. This heart has a diagnosis, but I have not discussed it. You can see there is an important finding since you asked. There has been an apparent straightening of the left border of the heart. So probably we are dealing here with a case of mitral stenosis. That is a different issue altogether. But commenting on the inspiration here is good. Let us go to the next case now. So in this diagram, rotation is central, to the left, or to the right. When we say rotation, the rotation is said to be on the side where the distance is more. So here the rotation is to the left. That's the convention of reporting. So the side to which there is a greater distance, that is the side to which the patient has been rotated. That is a way of commenting, because rotation can be counted from either of the side. This is the convention in commenting on rotation. So whichever distance is greater, it's rotated to that side. It is an example of left-sided rotation. Okay. So we are going to the next case then. Comment. So find out the correct combination. So I'm showing you the structures again. These are the structures. We are getting all sorts of answers. So let's see which one is correct. So this is the clavicle, no doubt. This is the humerus, no doubt. The question is regarding this round structure. Now, this round structure you can easily understand is where the humerus is articulating. So this must be the glenohumeral joint. Acromion process is far away here. Here it is almost not seen. It should be somewhere here. So acromion process is the far end of the clavicle. This definitely is not in the same axis as clavicle. So it is a glenohumeral joint. So option C, clavicle, glenohumeral joint and proximal humerus are the right answers. So I hope this is clear. We move on to the next question. So what does this diagram show? So I think you are actually split between A and C. Let's see which answer is correct. Here the cardiac diameter is definitely not greater than half of the internal thoracic diameter. So there is no cardiomegaly. So obviously B is not the answer. Now whether it is normal or small, you try to understand one thing. There is no criteria for a small cardiac shadow. We never mentioned. So there is no lower limit to the size of the heart. There is only an upper limit. That is why the question of small cardiac shadow does not appear. It does not arise at all. There is no such diagnosis. So we have only two diagnoses, normal or enlarged for the heart. And since it is not enlarged, this is normal. So since cardiothoracic ratio is less than 0.5, it is a normal cardiac shadow. And it can definitely be inferred because you have the two diameters already pointed here. You can mentally see that it is definitely less than 0.5, less than half. So this is a normal cardiac shadow. Even if it is an underdeveloped heart, first of all, the diagnosis is not made through X-ray. Just as in ECG, we learned that not every heart disease can be understood through ECG. Similarly, not everything can be understood through an X-ray. X-ray only gives you certain limited information. To understand about the development of the heart, you have to do a cardiac MRI. So for congenital heart diseases, the investigation of choice is a cardiac MRI. Without doing a cardiac MRI, you cannot comment on development of heart. Because X-ray is just like a black and white projected shadow. How can you comment on development by a 2D shadow of an organ? It is totally inadequate information to comment on development. So also remember this thing, the investigation of choice for a congenital heart disease, ideally following echocardiogram, is a cardiac MRI. And this is not Silote sign. First of all, that was not in the option. These are normal bronchovascular markings. So the word Silote sign is used when there is a tumor or mass. It is not just blurring. A blurring with respect to something that is already present. I will show you Silote sign. Don't worry. Next. Try to answer this one. So you can see here that in the right lung field, there is an opacity. And this is typically known as lung consolidation. Let us quickly learn a few things about consolidation. When you get opacity or radio opaque shadow over the lung, that is called consolidation. So normally when you do a chest X-ray, this is how the lung fields look like. If there is opacity of any part, that can also be in the middle lobe or middle radiological zone, or it can also involve any other part, apical or lower zone. These are known as consolidations of lung. So how are consolidations formed? When the air is replaced by pus, water, or cell. So normally there is air, which is black. If that is replaced by cells or blood or exudate, then it appears to be consolidated. Now a consolidation, therefore, when you look at a consolidation, then typically the consolidation can give you three differentials. If it is exudate, then probably you are dealing with a pneumonia. If it is cells, mainly a bunch of cells, then it can be a mass or tumor. And if it is fluid, then you are probably dealing with an effusion. When a mass or consolidation is in the upper or the middle radiological zone of the lung, it's obvious it is not fluid, because fluid always accumulates from below upwards. But if it involves the lower part, then how do we understand whether we are dealing with an effusion or we are dealing with a non-effusion etiology? If there is an effusion, we find that in the consolidation, the upper margin of the consolidation is concave and the concavity is directed inward. It looks like the upper meniscus of a fluid, and therefore this is also called the meniscus sign. So if it is a fluid, any kind of effusion, then the upper margin is concave and directed inward. Understand, this is actually not like this. It is also an optical illusion. But this optical illusion helps us in diagnosis. So it is actually an optical illusion. Actually, the fluid is not placed like this. Had it been like this, then during respiratory system examination also, when you are percussing, the border of percussion will not be horizontal. Then the border of percussion will also be curved. We never get that. So why is the upper margin like this? A probable explanation is that when the pleura becomes partly filled with water and it surrounds the lung, it starts behaving like a concentric ring of fluid in which there is a core of air. So it starts behaving like a special type of lens that scatters the light. By light, I mean X-ray, in such a way that a meniscus-shaped shadow is formed. But it is, however, easy to remember that because it's a fluid, there is a meniscus. So if you find a meniscus, it is pleural effusion. But actually, the meniscus is not present in real life. This upper margin, which is concave, is an optical illusion. When the X-ray passes through the cylinder of fluid surrounding the lung, it scatters in a particular way, in such a way that the X-ray film gets the image in a curved manner. This is why in pleural effusion, we get the meniscus sign and the upper border of the opacity is concave. In case of solid masses, such things do not occur. So if you get an upper margin concave, it can be a curved tumor or it can also be pleural effusion. But as long as the costophrenic angles are not filled up, it is definitely not fluid, because fluid always accumulates from the most dependent part upwards. So that is why if the costophrenic angle is free, one thing for sure, it is not effusion. So it can be pneumonia or it can be a mass. And if the costophrenic angle is obliterated, it can be any three of this: pneumonia, mass, or effusion, and should be clinically correlated. So getting back to the cases once again, where we started. So here, this is definitely a consolidation, and it can be, it cannot be a soft tissue anomaly here, because you see the right margin of the heart has been partly blurred out. This is the Sileute sign. That is, it has involved the heart shadow. It is not over the heart shadow. And so it's probably a lung parenchymal disease, and collapse always pulls the mediastinum to its own side. Here you can see the mediastinum is not displaced. So if you see, this is the position of the trachea. It is almost central and slightly to the right. So as the trachea is in the midline, mediastinum is not shifted, so it cannot be collapse or fibrosis. This is basically your first year knowledge. You know, collapse and fibrosis pulls the apex towards itself, and pleural effusion and pneumothorax pushes the apex to the opposite side. And when the apex gets pulled or pushed, the trachea also gets pulled or pushed. So if the trachea is in the midline or slightly to the right, then the mediastinum is not shifted. So we cannot say it is lung collapse. Consolidation does not cause movement of the mediastinum. So most likely it is a lung consolidation. Now, when you talk about consolidation, one thing that comes in your mind is whether it is consolidation of the alveoli or consolidation of the interstitium. Based on this, actually, we discuss whether we are dealing with an interstitial lung disease or an alveolar disease. So how do we differentiate between them? Alveoli are represented by these sac-like structures, and the interstitium is the loose connective tissue that surrounds these alveolar structures. So if there is an alveolar disease like pneumonia, it will cause a solid pattern as seen in this yellow diagram. If there is an interstitial disease, it will cause a network-like pattern as seen in the red tag, because the inside of the alveoli will be normal, only the outside is abnormal. So you get a more dense, fluffy shadow in alveolar disease, and a nodular and reticulated pattern in case of the interstitial disease. So you see, here it is an alveolar disease because the shadow is dense. This shadow that you are seeing here is dense. It also merges with the heart shadow, indicating a positive Sileute effect. And this is the enlarged view of the shadow. It is a dense shadow, so probably we are dealing with consolidation or pneumonia. In contrast, this is an interstitial disease. You can easily see how this looks like a network of threads, as if the air spaces are intact, only the covering of the air spaces have undergone fibrosis. So interstitial disease have this kind of a reticulated or reticulonodular pattern. So I'll show you a picture. You try to tell me whether it is alveolar or interstitial. Also, another important finding is sometimes the air present in the bronchus can be seen through a consolidation. That is known as air bronchogram. Here you can see this bronchus and its division can be clearly seen. And this is an air bronchogram. This has been magnified here so that you can easily understand. Air bronchogram indicates that there is a patent bronchus or an air containing bronchus in the middle of a consolidated alveolus. This is a sign of pneumonia. So try to solve this. This is very easy. So almost all of you think this is interstitial disease, and yes, this is an interstitial disease. This is the pattern that you see in interstitial lung diseases, in viral pneumonias, in sarcoidosis, and all other interstitial pathologies of the lung. Next, we come to this one. Try to find out what this one signifies. So most of you are going with the option B and some with option C. As a differential diagnosis, you can go with C, no problem with that, because it is consolidation and because it's also pleural effusion because of the meniscus sign. But if you look very carefully, the trachea has been pushed to the opposite side. So probably we are not dealing with consolidation, which will not cause mediastinal shifting. So probably this is pleural effusion. Had the trachea not been visualized, then it could have been both consolidation and pleural effusion. However, one thing should be kept in mind, it can also be a pleural effusion overlying a consolidation. So you cannot rule out consolidation without a CT scan here. Fine. So we move on to the next case. I'm actually happy to see that you are getting an idea of how to interpret X-ray. One thing I think you have understood today, we are not actually learning the individual diagnosis. We are only learning the terminologies and how to find out the findings in an X-ray. In the final day, we'll put together the terminologies and we'll actually discuss diagnosis of diseases. So this is basically like a warm-up session where you get used to seeing a lot of X-ray and describe the pathology in the X-ray. What will be the answer to this? So most of you think it's option A will answer this. Before that, let us go to case number 10 and then we'll come back to case number 9. So what is the diagnosis here? So very nicely answered. You can see if the gas bubble is below the left dome of diaphragm, it is the fundic gas. And if the gas bubble is above the diaphragm, it is definitely a diaphragmatic hernia, showing that the fundus of the stomach has been pulled up by diaphragmatic hernia. Very good. So we move on to the next case. Be very careful with this diagnosis. Think and give your diagnosis. Okay, let us try to solve this question. So I've been getting all sorts of answer from A to C. To solve this question, we need to understand what this terminology stand for. When the heart is on the right side, that is dextrocardia. Of course, this is known to all of you. When there is dextrocardia plus all organs inverted, that is situs invertus. When there is situs invertus, which includes dextrocardia, plus ciliary malfunction, that is Carter-Jenner syndrome. When there is dextrocardia, of course, the heart shadow will be inverted with apex to the right. Similarly, when there is situs invertus, all organs will be inverted. In the chest X-ray, the gastric bubble will be on the right. These two were very clearly seen. When there is ciliary malfunction, multiple things will happen. It's difficult to say what will happen. But what will probably happen as a result is there will be repeated pulmonary infection. And that will lead to opacity in lung fields or prominent bronchovascular marking. The opacity can be both of alveolar pattern or interstitial, depending on what infection has happened. Now, with this idea, let us get back to the X-ray picture. So if you see here, the apex of the lung is on the right side. Apex of the heart is on the right side. The gastric bubble is also on the right side. So there is situs invertus. And obviously the bronchovascular markings have been increased. So probably if the option is given here, then we are probably dealing with Carter-Jenner syndrome. So I hope you understood why I landed up in this diagnosis. This is probably an interstitial bronchovascular pattern that we are dealing with. Okay. Let's solve this. So we are getting all sorts of answers. Let us understand this first, and then we'll come to the diagnosis. In the lung field, normally the lung field should be more or less black, not pitch black. That is not hyperlucent. When the lung field becomes very dark in color, the probable differentials are that you may have an overexposed film. For diseases, it can be air in the pleura, that is pneumothorax. In that case, you should be able to see the collapsed border of the lung. And also, there will be tracheal shifting, unless it's bilateral. It can also be emphysema. Emphysema is caused by smoking or alpha-1 antitrypsin deficiency. So it is almost, not almost, it's always bilateral. You cannot have a emphysema of one lung. That makes no sense basically. And therefore trachea will also not be shifted. So with these in mind, there is a fourth option also, that is hydropneumothorax. In hydropneumothorax, there is both pleural effusion and pneumothorax. And here the optical illusion occurs in a different way, so that the fluid produces a straight line border. This is the fluid. And above there is gas. So you get a hyperlucent lung field and an opacity below, and the meniscus sign is absent. Instead, you get a straight line here. And that way you understand there is air above it. It's not due to the pressure of the air again. It's because the artifact that is produced in pleural effusion does not occur here due to the air-water interface that is present here. So with this in mind, let us try to understand our case. Which one does it fit the best? First of all, this condition is unilateral, not bilateral. As it is unilateral, it cannot be overexposure. You cannot expose one half of the chest more. It cannot be emphysema, because emphysema is always bilateral. So we are left with pneumothorax and pleural effusion. Of course, it is not pleural effusion because the costophrenic angle is clear here, and therefore we are left with pneumothorax. To support your diagnosis, you can see that the margin of the collapsed lung can be seen here. And the whole heart has been shifted on this side. No heart shadow can be seen appreciably on the right side. So there has been a shifting of the mediastinum. The tracheal shadow is poorly seen, but if you develop an eye for seeing, you will see that the tracheal shadow has also been shifted. It has been shifted to the left. It's never to the left. It's either in the center or slightly towards the right. So everything here supports that there has been a mediastinal shifting with hyperlucent lung fields, and margin of the collapsed lung can be seen. So we are dealing with a case of pneumothorax. I hope this is clear to all of you. Okay, so we move on to the next case. Try to solve this. This is very easy. So what is your diagnosis here? Yes, very good. So this is hydropneumothorax. It's easily understandable. You have a horizontal line representing the fluid level instead of the meniscus sign. You have hyperlucent lung field, and this is the border of the collapsed lung. So everything fits into position, and you are getting hydropneumothorax. Also, due to the pressure, you can see there has been mediastinal shifting also. The trachea has been shifted to the opposite side. So this is hydropneumothorax. Very good. We move on to the next case. Try to solve this. So we are getting all sorts of answers from A to C. Again, let us study the case and then let us decide which one will be the most appropriate one. So when we comment on the size of the heart shadow, we know we have to find out the cardiothoracic and ratio. So we find out the maximum cardiac diameter that may not be in the same plane, maximum internal diameter of the thorax, and then find out the cardiothoracic ratio. Now, the heart may be enlarged by various mechanisms. In pathology, you have learned that when we talk of enlargement of heart, enlargement can be concentric and eccentric. In concentric, the heart grows inward, and in eccentric, the heart goes outward. Concentric hypertrophy typically happens in pressure overload. And eccentric hypertrophy or dilation of the heart typically happen in volume overload, when more blood comes to the heart. Now understand, in X-ray, we are only seeing a 2D representation of the shadow. We are not seeing the inside of the heart. So although echocardiography can easily comment on concentric and eccentric hypertrophy, X-ray cannot comment on concentric and eccentric hypertrophy. It only sees the outline, not the inside of the heart. So understand that if this is the normal size of the heart, even if the heart muscle is growing inward, the outer diameter will not significantly change. So concentric hypertrophy will not be seen on an X-ray. Whereas if the heart starts growing outwards, that is, if there is eccentric hypertrophy, then it can be easily identified on an X-ray. So what I'm trying to say is, it is only eccentric hypertrophy or dilation of heart that is visible on X-ray. Pure concentric hypertrophy is very difficult to see unless the heart actually has a mixed kind of hypertrophy. Also understand another thing. We are only commenting on the shadow of the heart, not on the heart proper. So if the pericardium enlarges due to accumulation of fluid, then the pericardium becomes like a bag of water. It swells up like this. Then also, in the language of X-ray, we call it cardiomegaly. Because cardiomegaly is defined only based on one formula, the cardiothoracic ratio greater than 0.5. There is no other criteria for cardiomegaly on X-ray. So here, as the cardiothoracic ratio increases, so technically it is cardiomegaly, although we can clearly understand that the problem is in the pericardium and the problem is not with the heart. So that is why I said that radiological diagnosis is not necessarily same as the pathological or clinical diagnosis. So a case of pericardial effusion based on the criteria of cardiothoracic ratio is cardiomegaly. On the other hand, concentric hypertrophy of the heart, although pathologically a hypertrophy, although based on echocardiographic finding it's a hypertrophy, on X-ray it may not be an hypertrophy because the cardiothoracic ratio does not change. So this is how the interpretation on X-ray will vary from the interpretation on clinical grounds or echocardiographic grounds. So that is why any case of pericardial effusion can also be called cardiomegaly, and that is radiologically correct, although not clinically a correct finding. So getting back to this case, you see here cardiothoracic ratio is enlarged, so it is cardiomegaly. Here there is a bag of water like configuration, so it is pericardial effusion. So the diagnosis is both. There is cardiomegaly due to pericardial effusion. That is your answer. So C is the right answer. Answer is both. Again, I'm repeating, clinically we cannot call this cardiomegaly probably, but radiologically this is cardiomegaly. Try to solve this. So this is definitely consolidation because there is whitening, but this is a classical appearance when multiple metastasis happens to the lung, and these are known as cannonball shadows. So round opacities filling up the lung, either singly or in multiple numbers, indicate metastasis to the lung, and therefore this indicates metastasis. This is a very classical picture, and on the next day when we discuss diagnosis, you will see more of such pictures. So what are the criteria to call something a nodule? When there is a single lesion, round or oval, between 1 to 5 centimeter, we call it a solitary pulmonary nodule. When they are multiple, then we call it multiple pulmonary nodule or cannonball metastasis. When the lesion is less than 1 centimeter, it is called, then it is just called a nodule. And when it is more than 5 centimeter, we call it a pulmonary mass. So this is how nomenclature is done. When it is between 1 to 5, it can be called a solitary nodule, or when they are multiple nodules. Try to solve this. Okay, so let us discuss the answer. It's very clear in this that the maximum diameter of the heart is definitely more than half of the internal thoracic diameter. So we are dealing with cardiomegaly here. Also, the costophrenic angle is clear, so this is not pleural effusion. And there is no evidence of consolidation here. So we are almost towards the end of this session, the first day session. So I'll show you, no, that someone is asking if the trachea is shifted. You can see the trachea is slightly towards the right, and slightly towards the right is a normal position of the trachea. Also, if you see very carefully, proper centralization has not been done in this X-ray. And that is why there may be some error in commenting on midline structures. We should not comment on midline structures here. So this is the last X-ray of the day. It is difficult. See carefully, go through all the points of observation and give your diagnosis. Who can tell me the diagnosis of the X-ray? What is the diagnosis that you will write? The diagnosis here is, if you look very carefully, let's go one by one. Always remember, the best way to understand something is to go point-wise. So coming to the lung fields, now I'm describing the X-ray. This is an X-ray which is in AP view, PA view, and we find here that the lung fields are clear. So these are the lung fields. The costophrenic angles on both sides are clear. The domes of the diaphragm look normal. I'm only commenting on the dome, not on the structure below. The cardiac shadow, if I trace the cardiac shadow looks apparently normal. If you take the diameter of the heart, the maximum diameter does not cross more than half of the internal thoracic diameter. So there is no cardiomegaly also. The bones are more or less normal. This is the central line, and trachea is almost central. The ends of the clavicle are more or less equidistant, not totally aligned though. So there may be a bit of centralization issue. This is the fundic gas. That's on the left side only. Coming to the other bones do not reveal any fracture. Cardiothoracic angles are also normal. And bronchovascular markings are also normal. So everything is normal. These are the shadows of the breast. So this is a female subject. And I have been telling you repeatedly, this is not hepatomegaly. This is very commonly misinterpreted. So this is a female subject and the breast shadow normally looks like this. So the diagnosis is, this is a normal X-ray. And the normal X-ray is always the most difficult X-ray because it's very difficult to comment on something as normal unless you know what is abnormal. So if you go step by step, you understand this is a normal X-ray. That's how normal X-ray looks like. If you talk about the inspiration, then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, partially 8. So at least 6 ribs are anteriorly counted. So even inspiration is good. Also, the exposure is also good because the ribs are just barely visible through the cardiac shadow. So everything is normal. Apart from the centralization, almost everything is normal in this X-ray. So I hope this is clear to all of you. And today you got an idea of how to interpret the X-ray. We did not discuss a lot on the diagnostic part today. Diagnosis will be discussed on the third day. So in a similar fashion, in tomorrow's class, we will try to discuss the basic essences, the principles and the terminologies related to interpretation of CT scan of the brain. And again, based on that, on the third day, we'll discuss the diagnostic features. So over to the organizers now. Garima, you can take over from here.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. I think that was a wonderful way of understanding the X-ray in a new way. I hope most of our interests have been cared of. If any of you have any doubts or any suggestions or any questions, do let us know in the WhatsApp groups, and we'll redirect them to sir, and we'll get back to you with the answers. Also, stay connected, as we will be putting up the recorded video soon on our YouTube channel. So if you haven't subscribed it yet, go and subscribe it. And thank you so much, sir. Also, if any one of y'all have missed our previous master classes by Dr. Tithankar Guha Thakurta, that is on ECG and neurology, the recorded videos are already up on our YouTube channel. You can always go back and check on them. Thank you for all the love and appreciation. Hoping to meet you soon tomorrow for the day 2 of the workshop. Thank you from Dr. Swarakos. This is Garima leaving today. Thank you.